I'm Hugh Hewitt inside the Beltway, where tonight story number one comes from an exclusive article at Iran International titled, and I'm holding it up if you're watching on the Salem News Channel, Iran's central bank warns economy may take 12 years to rebuild after the war. Iran's central bank has warned President Pezeshkian that rebuilding the country's war-damaged economy could take more than a decade. In a stark assessment delivered to the president in recent days, senior economic officials said the damage inflicted during the 40-day war with the United States and Israel, combined with Iran's already fragile economic situation, could take up to 12 years to repair. Several major airports were damaged during the conflict, while strikes also targeted oil facilities, refineries, petrochemical installations that are central to Iran's export revenues and industrial supply chain. Officials involved in the discussions warned that the destruction of production capacity could trigger a sharp surge in inflation in the coming months. According to the assessment presented to the president, inflation could reach as high as 180% if shortages of industrial inputs persist. It goes on and on and on and on. All the details. It's been leaked, obviously, by someone within the country who hates the regime. They're on the ropes. They're on the ropes. With that in mind, let's turn to J.D. Vance talking last night with Bret Baier on Special Report, cut number one.
I 100% agree with the president on the fact that Iran can't have a nuclear weapon. I've seen that just in the negotiation that we've had over the last couple of days, that these are tough negotiators, but they're fundamentally the kinds of people where them having a nuclear weapon would impose terrible costs on the entire world. If they're willing to engage in economic terrorism on the entire world, what would it mean? What leverage would they have if they had a nuclear bomb in Tehran? That's not an outcome that is acceptable to us or really should be acceptable to anybody. So I 100% support the president's goals here to keep nuclear weapons, to keep the worst weapons of war out of the hands of the Iranians.
Okay, he went on to say, give a review of what happened in Islamabad. Vice President Vance, cut number two.
I wouldn't just say that things went wrong. I also think things went right. We made a lot of progress, but we also made very clear, and I think this is part of the progress we made, what the terms where the United States could make some accommodation, what terms we were flexible on, and what things we absolutely needed to see in order for the President of the United States to feel like he was getting a good deal. And so we laid those things out. We had some good conversations. I think it was the first time that you had ever seen the Iranian government, the U.S. government meet at such a high level, maybe in the history of the current leadership of Iran. So that's, I think, a positive. And again, we did make some progress in the negotiation. The big question from here on out is whether the Iranians will have enough flexibility, whether the Iranians will accept the critical things that we need to see in order for things to get done.
Well, what are the red lines, like, for Iran, and what didn't they accept? Why are we at the place we're at now?
Yeah, so back out just a little bit, Brett. What the President of the United States has said is, number one, Iran can never have a nuclear weapon. So all of our red lines flow from that fundamental premise, because it is one thing for the Iranians to say that they themselves are never going to have a nuclear weapon. They are willing to say that, and that's good. But you have to, of course, verify these things. And there are two things in particular where the President of the United States really said we have no flexibility. We have to get to the outcome that the President said. On the first of those things, what some people call the dust, which is the enriched uranium that the Iranians currently possess, we have said that we want that to come out of their country, and we would like to take possession of it. Now, why does that matter? That doesn't matter, of course, because they have access to that material now. That material is actually buried underground by Operation Midnight Hammer. But if you think about this over the long haul, the president doesn't want to leave the next president or the president after that to be worrying about this program. And so we would like to get that material out of the country completely so that the United States has control of it. That's number one. And the second thing is that, again, to this point about verification, it's one thing for the Iranians to say that they're not going to have a nuclear weapon. It's another thing for us to put in place the mechanism to ensure that's not going to happen. Part of that is, of course, to ensure that they don't have the ability to enrich uranium, which is how they got so close to a nuclear weapon before. So those are really the two things where, frankly, the Iranians, I think, did make some progress. They moved in our direction, which is why I think we would say that we had had some good signs, but they didn't move far enough. And so what we decided is, you know what, given that we don't think this current team and this current timeline is going to be able to make a deal, let them go back to Tehran. We're going to go back to Washington, and that's where we are today.
And then he went on to talk about, Brett asked him, what about gas prices? Cut number 3.
Should the American people be ready for more increased prices, especially at the gas tank, considering that this does not look like it's going to resolve very quickly as far as the Strait of Hormuz?
Well, you know, the president said, Brett, that yes, gas prices are higher. Yes, energy prices are higher. First of all, they're higher from a baseline where we've never had the terrible energy prices that we had of the last administration. So we come at this from a position of strength. But, Brett, absolutely, we know the American people are hurting. That's why that we're negotiating so aggressively to try to get the energy prices to come down. We're going to keep on working at it. I do think that we're in a place where we've accomplished our objectives. We can start to wind this thing down. I'd much rather wind this thing down with a big successful negotiation. But regardless, the president said this is not going to go on forever. That's never his intention. And I think because of that, the energy prices, while painful, are not going to be around forever.
Mr. Vice President.
That's good news. However, we do know that the team they sent from Iran couldn't close the deal, and the vice president acknowledged it, cut number 4.
Come out of the country of Iran. Now, what's interesting, Brett, about this is that in the process of doing this negotiation, I do think that we acquired some knowledge about how the Iranians are negotiating. And this is ultimately why we left Pakistan, because what we figured out is that they were unable, I think the team that was there was unable to cut a deal, and they had to go back to Tehran, either from the supreme leader or somebody else, and actually get approval to the terms that we had set. So again, whether we have further conversations, whether we ultimately get to a deal, I really think the ball is in the Iranian court, because we put a lot on the table. We actually made very clear what our red lines were. We also made clear, Brett, that we actually would be very happy. The President of the United States has said he would be very happy if Iran was treated like a normal country, if it had
That would be a wonderful thing. Finally, JD made this point, cut number 5.
We have the military advantage. We now have additional economic pressure that we're applying on them through the blockade that we've imposed on their oil coming out of the Straits of Hormuz. So we have a lot of cards. We have the leverage, and we're going to see what the Iranians do with that.
And so that's how the blockade works. U.S. naval ships stop Iranian-flagged vessels going to the Strait, through the Strait of Hormuz?
Not just Iranian-flagged vessels, Brett, but any vessel that we know is going to Iranian ports or has come from Iranian ports. You're probably going to see some vessels try to reflag themselves. But, of course, we're going to know, because we have very good intelligence, which ships are going in and which ships are coming out that are connected to Iran. But, Brett, here's the very interesting thing about all this is that the only thing the Iranians have been able to do, they haven't, of course, beaten us militarily. They've had their military been decimated. They haven't been able to prosecute the case when it comes to weapons of war. What they have done is engage in this act of economic terrorism against the entire world. They basically threatened any ship that's moving through the Straits of Hormuz. Well, as the President of the United States showed, two can play at that game. And if the Iranians are going to try to engage in economic terrorism, we're going to abide by a simple principle that no Iranian ships are getting out either. We know that's a big deal to them. We know that applies additional economic leverage. And again, Brett, the president wants the Iranian people to thrive.
Leverage is what it's all about. The United States has it. Iran doesn't. How long can they go on, given this report about how bad their economy is? I don't know. Maybe a month. We'll see. But my goodness, the people in the streets, there just isn't any money. And now the last bit of their money is being shut down. And I'm going to ask Richard Goldberg after the break, what about their shadow banking? Because I would really like to see everyone who has facilitated their shadow banking stop that too and bring this regime, if not down, then to the level of civility expected of the minimum participant in the international order. You have leverage on your cell phone bill. Big Cell wants you not to look. Consumer Cellular wants you to look. ConsumerCellular.com/Hugh or call 1-800-411-4454, 1-800-411-4454, 1-800-411-4454. Best customer satisfaction among all the cell phone companies. Why? Because their customer service is U.S. based. They'll deal with you within 30 seconds of your calling that number, 800-411-4454. If you use my name, Hugh, and you make the switch, which takes about 20 minutes to do, keep your number, keep your data, use Hugh, you get your second month free. And if you're 50 and older, listen to this, you can get a single line with unlimited talk, text, and data for just $35 a month. A single line, unlimited talk, text, and data, $35 a month if you're 50 years and older. ConsumerCellular.com/Hugh, 1-800-411-4454. Richard Goldberg is a senior advisor at the Foundation for the Defense of Democracy. He's one of those people actually knows what he's talking about on Iran. Richard, I want to start with this story from Iran International. Iran's central bank warns economy may take 12 years to rebuild after the war. How much credibility did you give this report?
Well, it probably has a good deal of credibility. I mean, I think our own back of the envelope has been in the hundreds of billions of dollars of damage done to the economy already on our side. Now, obviously, the Iranians, for their own propaganda, might want to try to put out a big number because they've supposedly asked for some sort of reparation payments and negotiations. But at the same time, Iran International usually gets a hold of some pretty good information, some good intel leaks. And so I think if you match that with what they had also reported a few weeks ago of President Pezeshkian sending almost a memo to these IRGC officials who've taken charge of the country saying, we can't hold out much longer, the whole economy is on the verge of collapse, it does paint a much more dire picture of what's going on inside the country for this rump regime than what they would lead us to believe through their cognitive warfare.
Now, Richard, the one thing that makes me uneasy is I used to have friends who knew about the South African regime before it gave way, and they could have gone to the mattresses. They could have kept their nukes. They could have kept their bank accounts. The Iranian regime has got a lot of money stowed away overseas in shadow accounts and in banking, even in the UAE and Dubai. Do we have any plan to cut them off from that money if they don't come to the table?
I think your question couldn't be more timely. It would appear what the administration is doing right now, combined with the blockade on the naval waters, is going from Operation Epic Fury to Operation Economic Fury. And so a letter apparently was sent just today to the UAE, to Oman, to Hong Kong, and to China, and all their banks saying, we know that there's shadow banking. We know you may be holding on to or processing some sort of Iranian funds. We are watching. We are now on warning. We are going to use the full maximum pressure of our sanctions and cut you off from the United States the minute we have evidence that you are handling their funds. Stop it right now. Freeze them in place. We'll see if that has a big impact. There was a big warning letter just sent out in the last few hours. And then on top of that, obviously, the lack of imports coming into the country. We focus a lot on the export cutoff of oil, obviously, and other exports where they would get revenue, but they can't import either. And so that's also going to create a major balance of payments crisis. The prices inside the country are going to skyrocket, hyperinflation going through the roof, even where it already is at. The banks, which were already teetering back in January, we know about, will have even more pressure on them. And gasoline will not be coming into the country, something that increasingly last year they had to rely on imports for, and it actually just cut subsidies on at the end of last year.
So, Richard, I stayed up late Saturday night waiting for the vice president to come out and make a statement. Very, very relieved when it turned out to be Reykjavik 2.0 and not Munich. Are you feeling good right now about where Team Trump is vis-a-vis the remnants of this regime?
I am. If you put aside the cognitive warfare piece that this rump regime is very good at, and unfortunately, they have a lot of nodes throughout the United States that can echo and their propaganda, unnamed sources suddenly in the Wall Street Journal or Axios, wherever it is, and they can push this out onto social media, and you believe that we're losing. Oh my gosh, we're losing. How is this possible? I think the more accurate assessment is likely what the president sees, which is a rump regime that has no ability to defend the country anymore, is hanging on to remnant offensive capabilities to keep that propaganda going, is on the verge of an economic collapse potentially if you push them over the edge. So I don't think he would be inclined to say, hey, I'm going to give you back the JCPOA after I've brought you to the brink of collapse. But at the same time, we probably have a little bit of deficiency in the full intel picture because a lot of people are dead. A lot of other people are hiding. The communication is broken down. And actually having a delegation come to Islamabad and watching them, how they prepared, who was there, who seems to be the leader, who's in charge, who do they have to report to when they go back to Tehran. The fact that the vice president said they couldn't make a decision, they had to go back and talk to somebody. He said the supreme leader or somebody in his interview that you just played. So I think we're learning a lot more about the dysfunction inside. Now that the bombs have stopped dropping for the moment in the ceasefire, the Iranian side's probably learning a lot more about the devastation that they have actually suffered. And now with the U.S. Navy through the Strait, alongside a blockade and the crackdown on the banks, this is a lot of leverage for the President of the United States to get what he wants at the table.
And Richard, a key player who's not at the table but is in the background is the People's Republic of China. What did they want to see happen, do you think? What is at least acceptable for them to see happen?
Well, two things I would say. First of all, the Chinese and the Russians have not come to the rescue of the remnant regime. There's a lot of, unnamed sources. Oh, there might be a shipment of radar coming or of air defense or precursor chemicals for fuel. None of that has actually materialized. And from a substantive contribution to saving the regime from the devastation of Epic Fury, nothing actually was there. So, whatever they thought they were going to rely on from their agreements with the Chinese, with the Russians, didn't come to fruition. Now, the Chinese obviously have sort of a double-edged sword here. On the one side, they depend on all of the oil and petrochemicals and other imports out of the Gulf. Not just Iran, which is 1.5 to 2 million barrels per day of illicit oil exports that they're getting, plus the petrochemicals, but also Saudi Arabia, the UAE, all the players that you would think of. They're importing massive more amounts for their own economy from the Gulf. They can't actually long-term sustain the idea of the Strait of Hormuz being shut down or the Iranians somehow being in control of their fate and destiny. At the same time, they have been stockpiling for years now with the cheap discounted sanctioned oil from Iran, from Russia, from Venezuela, and had some sort of runway to try to see if the Iranians could hold on. Could we lose control? Could this turn out in their favor where we lose control of the Strait of Hormuz? Now that we have transitioned from epic fury to economic fury, and we're imposing our will potentially on the imports and exports out of Iran, the Chinese are now seeing their fate may be in our hands. They're still going to need the oil to come out of the Strait of Hormuz. They still need stability to be restored, but we are now setting the terms. And so if we're able to actually keep this blockade in place, actually be able to dictate the future of the Strait of Hormuz, this is not a good future for the Chinese. They stand to benefit from us opening the strait and bringing them their own oil out from Saudi Arabia and the rest of the Gulf. But they will long term, and I think they know this, have a strategic loss in all they've invested in Tehran.
Okay, 1 minute, Richard. The friends of Iran and in the American media, or people who are at least not enemies of Iran, are spinning the Lebanon situation wildly. We have 1 minute. What do you understand the situation in Lebanon to be?
Well, Hezbollah obviously is the OG of the terrorist proxies of the regime in Tehran. And they got into the fight on order of Tehran in the middle of Epic Fury, and they started launching their missiles and their drones and their rockets at the state of Israel under cover of ceasefire for the last couple of years since the end of the Biden administration when they pushed the Israelis into a ceasefire in Lebanon. Obviously, Iran has been trying to rebuild Hezbollah. The Israelis have incredible intelligence. It appears a massive operation to neutralize hundreds of operatives and officials very quickly. The regime would like to see Hezbollah survive. I don't think the United States wants to see that happen. Israel doesn't want to see that happen. And the U.S. is now on Israel's side, working with the government of Lebanon, bringing them to the U.S. to say, work with us to take back your country. We're not giving Lebanon back to Iran.
I hope you are right. Richard Goldberg, thank you for joining me from the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies. Follow him online at Rich_Goldberg, at Rich_Goldberg. Now it's April 14th. I want to tell you about a movie that is opening on May 1st. Now, they are sponsoring a campaign on my show, and I had to approve it. But I have known Stephen Myers of the Discovery Institute for, 25 years. And The Story of Everything is a big screen, magnificent movie a cinematic exploration of the cosmos that reveals the hidden hand behind our universe, from the precise laws that govern the stars to the pattern found in every living cell. This is the argument from design. Now, the argument from design has always been, to me, the most convincing argument for the existence of God. It's like finding a fork on the moon or finding a fork on Mars. You know, we land on Mars someday. Elon gets up there and he lands and he finds a fork. What's that tell you? Well, someone's been there before, somebody pretty smart, and they left a fork. Well, if you look around the universe, and my whole theology is this: God intends people to know that he's God. He intends you to be able to figure out how he operates. He has provided sacred scriptures to figure that out and give you an assist. It all comes down to faith. But for the faith beginner or the faith challenged, nice to have the science on your side. And so the storyofeverything.com, that's their website, but just draw a little circle around the date, May 1. May 1 is when the Story of Everything actually makes it into theaters. I want you to be ready to go, and I'm going to tell you about it every day, once a day, between now and May 1st. I'll try and get Stephen Myers on, Dr. Myers, Discovery Institute up in Seattle. He's been on many, many times. He's written great books, always been a friend of the program. So I'll have him on a couple of times before the movie comes out. Let me take my Relief Factor. I'm in the Relief Factor studio. I'm thinking about it, so I might as well take it. Icarian and curcumin, resveratrol, and omega. I did not do any miles at all this morning. I had to be downtown to do a panel at the American Global Security Conference, which I did. But, you know, it's sometimes an adventure to ride in a cab around D.C. So this was an adventure. And I had my Icarian, curcumin, resveratrol, and omega. And it helped. Not every ride in D.C. is smooth, and sometimes they can be, well, a jolt-filled experience. That was today. Jolts don't bother me. Jolts don't bother me, because Relief Factor takes care of the minor aches and pains that come with jolts or bad commutes. So if you're out on a lunch break right now in L.A., and you're feeling your back, your knees, your ankle, or you're getting ready to jump in the car early, maybe scoot from the hill a little bit early, though they came back today, don't forget to take your relieffactor.com. Don't leave home without it. 1-800, the number 4, and the word relief. $19.95 for the starter pack, a 3-week supply. 1-800, the number 4, and the word relief. Or go to their website and order up at relieffactor.com. One more sponsor today. One more. BestHotGrill.com. Our friends Rhett and Irene have been sponsors of me. They're sponsors of the After Show, now known as Dwayne Worlds, on Tuesdays and Thursdays. They are sponsors of everyone who loves good barbecuing because they make Solaire infrared grills. The magnificent grill they heat up in just 3 minutes to searing heat. They make the juiciest grilled food you have ever had. And right now they have the try it before you buy it Solaire demo rental program for only $47. I don't know how they came up with that number. I've got to ask Rhett why they came up with $47. Maybe it's because you remember it. $47. You get the infrared demo grill for 2 weekends and the week in between in the comfort of your backyard. Use it for 9 straight days. Try everything on it. Try fish, pork, veggies, and of course, steak. Try your best, and the veggies. You can try it too if you like the grilled veggies. I don't get it. At the end of your demo period, you just wipe it off, put it in a box for UPS pickup. Solaire makes it easy. Then you'll get a coupon for $47 off any of those. If you're watching on the Salem News Channel, you just saw the array of Best Hot Grill products. There are 5 different Best Hot Grills, maybe 6. I didn't really count. From the smallest hibachi to the big old Artemis 3 grill. That's not really the name of the grill, but they ought to call the next one the Artemis 3 grill. That's my suggestion. To find out more, go to besthotgrill.com. Besthotgrill.com. Finally, since it's Sponsors Corner, at the end of the show, I'll tell you as well, andrewandtodd.com. I'm giving them a double dip today because markets are kind of frothy today. They're having a good day. That means interest rates are probably going to go up a little bit and then they'll go down. Fed's not going to drop rates for a while. You really need to go and get your prior mortgage approval while you can at andrewandtodd.com. Angel Del Rey and Todd Avakian have been my friends for 25 and 15 years respectively, and I did my mortgage with Andrew and Todd when I came here. They're with Union Home Mortgage. You want the best mortgage in uncertain times. Get pre-approved. If you're a veteran, you don't have to put any money down. If you're a first-time home buyer, you want to work with people who know what they're doing. They've served thousands of my listeners. That music means David Drucker is in the house. David is the chief political correspondent for the Dispatch. He's also a columnist for Bloomberg. David, you and I are Californians, though we have both fled the state. California lost Eric Swalwell this week from the ticket and from their delegation. Now, ever since Fang Fang, I've known he was not to be trusted, but I just thought he was an average knucklehead. I didn't know he was a predator. Had you ever heard whispers that he was a predator?
I mean, nothing credible. I mean, nothing that made me feel the need to look into it. The thing about Hugh, the thing about being a reporter in Washington is like I received a rumor of just about everybody in public life at one time or another. And so that's the sort of thing that just happens. So like you, I was surprised. I mean, look, I always thought Swalwell was punching above his weight in that he seemed like an effective member of the House of Representatives for what his Democratic constituents wanted out of him. But I never saw him as presidential material. He ran for president in 2024 briefly, or 2020, one of those. And when he emerged as a top contender for governor in California, I was somewhat surprised. But in talking to some people back there, Democratic voters who really don't. I mean, Democratic voters don't like Trump, but in California, it's like ratcheted up times 10. They liked Swalwell because he was so combative versus Trump. So it makes sense in retrospect. But no inkling of this.
Okay, let's talk about that race. Two people make it through. It's a jungle primary. Republicans are kind of hoping that Steve Hilton and the sheriff of San Bernardino, whose name I can't recall, Bianco, make it through. But I'm thinking, God forbid, but I'm thinking Katie Porter's the one who bounces up. Is there any way Antonio Villaraigosa or anybody else can catch Katie Porter at this point?
Well, the latest polling I've seen has shown Tom Steyer way up there because he's basically, spending the entire GDP of its 6 countries to try and get elected. But it might work in this case. California is not big on retail politics. You and I are both from there. It's not big on retail politics. It's a huge state, and it's all about advertising. And so it kind of makes sense that this is the kind of campaign Steyer could finally win with all of his money. And I wonder if instead of Porter, some other Democrat can break loose and either give Steyer a run for his money or escape into the top 2 with Steyer. But we're gonna have to see what happens.
Dave, one thing and I know from our years and decades in California, there are 2 organizations that matter: the SEIU, Service Employees International Union, and the California Teachers Association. And they have the troops. They've got the infantry. They can seize and hold ground. They can turn in the absentees that are left lying around. I'm not saying they cheat. I'm just saying they're very good at ballot collecting, which is legal in California. Have you seen any indication that either of them has thrown their weight one way or the other?
I haven't, but I haven't followed this race too closely, just with so much else to follow. And in California, it seems so predictable. But now it's at least interesting in that Democrats were really in a bind there because they had so many candidates who were convinced that 2 of them would get into the second round, if you will, that's going to be held on Election Day in November, that they weren't worried about clogging the drain there and allowing 2 Republicans to slip through instead. There was a real concern for a while, but nobody would get out of the way. So Swalwell's bad behavior solves that problem for them. And I suspect at some point the players will start to drift in the direction of somebody. I think what they're waiting to see is, who really emerges as that second tier Democrat or that second Democrat to go catch up to Steyer now. Or, let's see if the polling in the next couple of weeks totally turns upside down and looks differently. Porter's problem is that she's not likable. She doesn't handle the press well. And she's just not the kind of candidate that people warm to. There's no charm there, and that's just a big problem for her.
Yeah, domestic violence doesn't go over well with people. And dumping, potatoes on her ex-husband's head. I'm not sure what the story was. I'll have to check it out. But she's not a likable person. She was my congresswoman for a while back in the old days. She replaced eventually Mimi Walters, who replaced John Campbell back in the days when I lived in Orange County. Let me ask you about Steyer, though. I have very little experience with it, other than the fact I believe his campaign misled the Nixon library when they wanted to cut an ad there. They said they just wanted to use the backdrop. And as I recall, they actually slammed Nixon, so it was kind of sneaky, disgusting. What's your opinion of Steyer?
Look, he's a vanity candidate. I mean, he's been very successful in business. So let me give him his due. The guy's made a lot of money. He's been very successful. And like a lot of successful people, they somehow decide the best thing they can do with all their money is waste it on a campaign. And so he spent a lot of money running for president, didn't get anywhere. And I mean a lot of money. And now he's spending a lot of money in California running for governor. Now, the thing he has going for him, California in this race, is Californians tend to elect boring, bland, non-charismatic people as their chief executive. I mean, Arnold Schwarzenegger and Ronald Reagan, and I suppose Pat Brown notwithstanding, and now I'm really reaching into the way back. We can point to a number of governors, Jerry Brown, Pat Brown's son, not very charismatic, George Duke-Majan. Maybe Pete Wilson was fiery, but it's not like he brought the house down, and so on and so forth. So this is sort of a campaign that's made for him. And again, particularly because it's going to be all about advertising, because California is just, I'm sure the candidates are doing town halls and stuff, but it's not it's not like a New Hampshire or Georgia or Michigan. You could name some medium-sized states where retail is a big deal.
Yeah, I'm waiting to see SEIU and the teachers. Last question. We have a new story at The Atlantic today. Joe Biden really wanted to pick Gretchen Whitmer to be his vice president, but Black Lives Matter made him pick Kamala Harris. That's nonsense. He picked Kamala Harris, but is this just the beginning of puffery for Gretchen Whitmer?
Well, I don't know. I actually, look, Elaine Godfrey is a really good reporter, I think. And I haven't read her story yet, but to me it was very intriguing because I think what is true is that Gretchen Whitmer was a much talked about heavyweight and presumed future presidential candidate. And she's not approaching 2028 like any of her colleagues, right? Governor Josh Shapiro in Pennsylvania, Governor J.B. Pritzker in Illinois. I mean, she's really just taken she's kind of established more of a low profile in her last term here and done and really spent a lot of time trying to be, to get along with the White House and things like that. And it's great politics in Michigan, which is now a quintessential swing state. But she's not doing the kinds of things that would suggest she's interested in running for president. So I want to read the story before I comment on it, but I do think she, was a major and could still be a major rising Democratic figure. And the fact that she's not doing what a lot of...
We shall see, David. We're out of luck. Mr. Leprechaun, Love your green shirt. We have the embargo in place, we being the United States. The embargo is stopping ships from going into or leaving Iranian ports. How long can they put up with their kind of economic warfare? Here's Energy Secretary Chris Wright on Fox News on the blockade, cut number 7.
We put the military pressure on Iran to degrade their capacities to menace the region, and now we're going to put an economic squeeze on them, end their oil revenues from coming out of their country. There'll be other sources of economic pressure as well, but that's the way to bring this conflict to an end.
Former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo also on Fox News today talking about what the embargo and the war is doing to our principal adversaries, Russia and China. Cut number 8.
They are clearly weakened as a result of what President Trump and the Israelis have decided to do together. You're right. It's not just for China. It's not just about the energy. Iran was their gateway to the Middle East. It was their primary partner. And the Russians, too, are now greatly diminished. Think about this. They supported Hezbollah. They supported Hamas. They supported the regime in Syria that's now gone. The Russians' capacity to influence and shape events in the Middle East is now greatly reduced. And there were many countries that were participants alongside them. All of those countries, whether it's the Emiratis or the Saudis or the Omanis or the Kuwaitis or the Bahrainis, all of them now can see that Russian defense systems, Chinese defense systems aren't going to be of much value, and that the United States remains the preeminent power capable of actually assisting them in defending themselves, not only in the weeks ahead, but in the months and years ahead as well.
And then finally, Harris Faulkner on Fox News bringing us the up-to-date news on the embargo, cut number 9.
U.S. blockade of the Strait of Hormuz. In effect for nearly 2 hours now. A ship tracking firm reports 121 empty oil tankers are making their way to the United States of America. 68 of those 121 vessels are very large crude carriers capable of carrying 2 million barrels apiece. President Trump has urged countries squeezed by Iran's disruption of the Strait of Hormuz to turn to American energy supplies instead. Well, it would appear perhaps they are obliging him. They are listening to Trump. The president told Fox, quote, China can send their ships to the U.S., China can send their ships to Venezuela, while also saying that empty oil-carrying ships from many nations are all headed to the U.S. to load up. That from the president of the United States. A lot to follow.
You know, one of the things people have to understand is if you own a tanker, it can't sit around. There are costs, opportunity costs involved in not having cargo, which is why you try and arrive someplace and take on something else and take it back. That's why one-way traffic is not as good as two-way traffic. But the worst thing to have is a super tanker, the biggest ship on the ocean, and have it empty. So you're not going to wait around and see whether or not the Strait of Hormuz opens or the ports of Iran open. You're going to go where you can fill that tanker with something, provided you're not an illegal tanker. More on that coming up with Brett Baer next hour and much, much more. Stay tuned here on the Salem News Channel, Salem Radio Network, and our wonderful radio affiliates to this, The Hugh Hewitt Show.
I wouldn't just say that things went wrong. I also think things went right. We made a lot of progress, but we also made very clear, and I think this is part of the progress we made, what the terms where the United States could make some accommodation, what terms we were flexible on, and what things we absolutely needed to see in order for the President of the United States to feel like he was getting a good deal. And so...
Morning glory and evening grace, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. That was Vice President Vance last night on my guest Brett Baer's program, Special Report. I'll be joining Brett tonight on the panel. Brett, I'm going to go to your interview with the Vice President in just a moment. But first, you're a Masters guy. How did you enjoy the tournament?
Oh, it was fantastic. You know, I went down with my son Wednesday and then the first round on Thursday, and there's nothing like it, you know, tradition unlike any other. And I thought it was fantastic, the drama and Rory fighting and losing, you know, on Saturday and then fighting back. And I just thought it was a great, great tournament. And I'm happy that he repeated. That's a tough thing to do. And he's a worthy champion.
You know, more of my people are buried in Saintfield, Northern Ireland, and County Down than there are here in the States. So I always root for Rory. But he's getting up there, and Scheffler was on fire. Did you follow Scotty at all on the first couple of days when he wasn't on fire?
Yeah, and I was surprised that he wasn't at the beginning. But he always seems to be there in the end. And, you know, Justin Rose was there, as he has been. So there was a lot of people knocking on the door. I played in the AT&T at Pebble Beach a number of years with Russell Henley, so I was kind of pulling for him, and he did well, finished third, and he at one point had a share of the lead on the back nine.
Last golf question, Brett. I do not have a good fix on Justin Rose. He falls into that period of time when I'm not really paying much attention to golf. I'm doing other stuff. And he's 45 years old, but he's getting up there to be as competitive as he is. Does he have a reputation on the tour? Because he always looks so grim-faced, but then someone on the one of the announcers said he's one of the best-liked guys on the tour. Oh,
everybody loves him. He's a huge, huge favorite down there in Augusta. And if he had won, he would have been a very popular champion. You know, he's finished second 3 times, twice in the playoff. And now, you know, he was up the leaderboard this time, so he would be a popular champion, and he's obviously won the U.S. Open, and he's a big factor in the Ryder Cup. So yeah, he's still got it. He would be the oldest since Jack Nicklaus in '86 if he did win the Masters.
I don't know if you're allowed to answer this, but if you are allowed to answer it, and if you have played Augusta, what's the best round you've shot?
I have played Augusta. I've been fortunate enough to play Augusta, and I, believe it or not, shot even par. Now, different tee box. Different tee box, but well,
that's right. That's news. I think we should lead with that. All right, Brett, let's go to last night. I have played almost every major excerpt of your interview with the Vice President. Today we get a story from Iran International that Iran's central bank has warned the economy may take 12 years to rebuild after the war. They're looking at inflation of possibly 180% unless the ports reopen really quickly. Do you get the sense that the vice president is in the catbird seat, or the president?
I do think that the leverage is increasing, and it seems like at least the administration is saying that they think there will be more in-person talks in Islamabad in coming days. Vice President couldn't pin that down in the interview last night. But between us and the rest of your listeners, we have had outreach with the Iranians, and we've been close to getting the Iranian foreign minister on the show, and may be able to do that tomorrow. So it seems like they want to send a message as well, and whether that tracks with getting back to the negotiating table, we'll see.
Well, you have had the foreign minister on before. He's Sharif-like in his eloquence and is a terrific communicator. Do we know, did you pick up in prepping for interviewing with the vice president, who is really running the play? I know we've got the story of the five guys, but the political people don't really run that place. It's the generals. Do we have any sense of who the foreign minister speaks for?
Yeah, that's one of the problems, and you heard that in the vice president's remarks, that they had to go back and kind of get approval. It sounds like the IRGC commanders have a lot of power, and that the other politicals do not. But we'll have to see. If they do a deal, they're doing a deal as a country, and they'd have to live up to it, which the Iranians don't have a great track record of.
Now, the vice president said we have to get the nuclear dust, using President Trump's term. That's a month-long, very careful, possibly killing the people who hit the wrong stone and glass and irradiating them sort of excavation. Can you imagine, Brett, a detailed agreement that would allow us to supervise or superintend that extraction?
It would have to be structured probably through the IAEA, and it would be very complex. In the meantime, the intel folks I talked to say, as the president has said publicly, they have a 24/7 eye on the sky on where they know it to be, and making sure that it's not touched or disrupted in the current state.
Now, you know as well as I do, one of the greatest critiques of the JCPOA was that the inspections it allowed for were not anytime, anywhere, no notice, knock-knock inspections. They were, you had to call up and schedule, and they could decline, and they put off limits large military bases. Do you get the sense from the vice president that any deal with us has to be anytime, anywhere, no-knock inspections?
Yes. I think the stories about the proposals of when they could enrich, the U.S. was at 20 years and the Iranians were at 5. I think you're going to end up at 15 or something. But I think that the inspection part of it was much more rigorous than JCPOA.
Yeah, question would be, why would we even allow them to enrich, Brett? To me, I heard that when he said 20. 20 goes by in a hurry. It won't be my problem. Might be your problem, but it won't be my problem. Why 20 and not never?
That's a good question. If enrichment is to enrich to a certain point, we believed them before, where they said that they were at 20%, or medical grade, even lower. But and when they hand over a document that says 900 pounds at 60%, that could go to weapons grade, 90% in a couple weeks. That's a different animal.
Yeah. All right, I'm foreshadowing what we might be talking about tonight, but I'll relay to you what Richard Goldberg of FTD said in the first hour. We sent a letter today to UAE, Dubai, Saudi Arabia, China, and a couple other places saying, we know you've got their shadow funds. Either you freeze them or turn them over to us, or you're going to feel the full fury of our banking sanctions. Have you heard about that yet? And I can't believe we'd do that to UAE, but do you think we would?
Now, the UAE has frozen Iranian funds. They just did it a few days ago. So I'm not sure whether we're talking past each other on the UAE, but I specifically know they have. Other countries are, I'm told, feeling a lot of pressure on a lot of fronts from the Trump administration. including China, ahead of this trip to China that's still on by the president going to see President Xi Jinping. So I'll be making that trip over to China. And, I think that this moment, if you want to read in between Chinese officials, they want to be a part of this solution negotiation, but they are not stepping up on the Strait of Hormuz as of yet, or, to your point, other assets.
When is the summit scheduled for, Brett Baer? Is it May 2nd
May
or something?
14, 15, something like that.
Okay,
It's,
so a month.
Yeah.
Do you think Jimmy Lai will be on the plane when you come back?
It would be a big deal if he was. But listen, there's going to be something baked in the cake. They're not going to go over there without deliverables.
That's why I'm hoping it's Jimmy Lai, because it's a low-cost give by Xi Jinping. It's a big win for the president, and given the Pope Leo the 14th back and forth, kind of a double win. Brett Baer, I'm not sure you
could be from a former altar boy. There could be some détente coming on the Catholic front. I think that might be wise after the last 2 days.
That's two of us, and we agree. Brett Baer, I'll see you later tonight on Special Report. America's Anchorman kicks it off at 6 p.m. on Fox News. Don't miss that. America, coming up after the break here on the Hugh Hewitt Show. Let me consult my magic schedule and tell you I've got Bethany Mandel, and I will be talking to her about Rachel Goldberg's brand new book, When We See You Again. I interviewed Rachel today. I cannot play the interview because it's embargoed until next week, but I can talk about the book with Bethany Mandel, and I will do so after that. And now I can even finish the number for AndrewandTodd.com, 888-1172, 888-1172, 888-1172. AndrewandTodd.com. Call them and get your mortgage. On this April 14th, I'm pleased to welcome Bethany Mandel back to the program. Bethany, about an hour before the program today, I pre-taped a 30-minute interview for next week with Rachel Goldberg-Paulin about her book, When We See You Again. Have you read it yet?
I have not, but I talked to John, Rachel's husband. I've talked to their family about the book.
It's gut-wrenching, and it's not a book about grief. It is grief in pages. It's really a remarkable story. Do you think people will be willing to read it?
So the testimony of Eli Sharabi, his accounts of being held hostage and coming out of the tunnels of Gaza after being held for over a year to discover that his wife and two children were murdered, that book was a bestseller. What's special about Rachel Goldberg-Paulin is that she has this American experience because her and John were born and raised here, and they moved to Israel as adults. And so she has a way with words in English. It's her native language. She's such a compelling human and so captivating. I'm looking forward to reading it, and I think anyone who's seen her, which is now, tens of hundreds of millions of people have as well. Her story is incredible, and her strength is incredible. I was wearing a T-shirt the other day that they made while Hirsch was being held captive. Hope is mandatory, and that's the perspective that she held through that entire, almost a year of her her son being held captive before he was murdered by Hamas in the tunnels under Rafah.
I had no idea. I kind of knew because I interviewed Rachel a couple of times that they're very deeply religious. But I didn't understand how interwoven her faith life is with this suffering period. I mean, we've got Job, Jacob, Isaac, and Moses in this, speaking directly to Rachel. Did you know that about her?
I did. She would talk a lot about, starting the day, reading Psalms, and, for every day that he was held hostage, she would read the corresponding psalm. And so if it was day 33 that he was being held hostage, she would read Psalm 33. So this sort of carried her through. And their life before the war started, she was working at a Jewish learning organization in Jerusalem. And so this was always such a huge part of their lives. And it's why they decided to move to Israel in the first place when Hirsch was still a young kid. So I knew that this was a pretty big thing in their lives.
Well, the book is divided into the before and the after, the day that separates them being October 7th. I can't recommend it enough. People ought to go out and buy it in advance. But it reminded me to ask you, when you go to temple, I didn't know this until I read the book. The boys and the girls sit on different sides with their mothers and their fathers. And there's a part of the service where the father puts their prayer shawl over their boy. Are you familiar with that?
Yeah, it's when the Kohanes, the descendants of the priestly class, are they're called up for a special ceremony. We actually had a lot of that happen over the holiday of Passover this year, and my kids guilted their dad into coming to synagogue because he does that with them. And one of the special things that they say about Hirsch was that even though he wasn't religious anymore, he still went to temple with his dad almost every single week because he didn't want him to sit alone because they were the only two men in their immediate family.
That's in the book, and John's afterword is particularly moving. I just can't recommend this enough, which brings me to my bigger question. You know, we're in the middle of a war with Iran. Iran is responsible for 10/7. I don't feel bad for any IRGC member who gets blown up. But what percent, unlike Gaza, which I think is deeply poisoned in the people, I don't think the Iranian people are that way. Do you?
I don't know. Everything that we've heard before the war, and I think one of the most striking stories that we've heard, because we've had basically radio silence from Iran since the war started. But when we lost our airmen for, close to 48 hours, one of the most striking things was the Iranian people drove on that road that separated Tehran and that region and parked their cars to try to prevent the regime from accessing those areas to give the Americans time to come in and airlift our guy out. So I think that really speaks volumes to, the sentiment in Iran about their regime and about what we're doing there.
So does that come through to you in legacy media coverage of this war, which seems to me sometimes to verge on rooting for Iran?
No, it's absolutely not. It's interesting. Someone sent me a clip from Norwegian television earlier today. His son is a classmate of my daughter's in an online Jewish school, and so he sent me a clip of something that had just played on television, and they were really amping up, even in Norway in their mainstream media, this idea that the Iranian people are under siege just as much as the regime is, and trying to play that sympathy card in the same way, in a way that I found to be very disingenuous. So perhaps we should take comfort in the fact that it's not just our mainstream media that's lying to us. It's a worldwide problem.
Well, I have heard, this is third-hand hearsay, that Iranians are happy that the bombs were falling and disappointed that they stopped. Is that consistent with your understanding?
That's what I've anecdotally heard as well. But again, it's the same sort of third hand, but I'm hearing that as well.
All right. Now I want to switch back to northern Israel and the Galilee. Do you think people feel safe enough to remove themselves or to move back there yet?
Not at all. No. And it's a significant portion of the country that lives up there. I wonder how many of those people will end up returning at all because, since October 7th, that area has been under siege more than most. And so, I think there's a lot of likelihood that the people who had lives up there have since moved on, who have since decided to live in, Jerusalem or Modi'in or Beit Shemesh and just sort of pick up their lives and permanently come to this understanding that, their homes might not be, salvageable.
Are you at all optimistic about these talks at the State Department? They've never been held before. Lebanon has never sat down in an official capacity with Israel. It's happening today with Marco Rubio at the head of the table. I think it's a big deal. Do you?
I do think it's a big deal. I mean, I never underestimate the negotiating power of the Trump administration, whether it be Witkoff or Jared Kushner or Marco Rubio. They are incredibly skilled at, cutting through the nonsense and getting agreements made and getting people to understand what's in their best interest. And so, I'm interested to see how this goes. I'm definitely not pessimistic about it.
And have you picked up any kind of hint about what the operation is that Israel pulled off 3 days ago that hammered Hezbollah like the beepers?
I haven't. No. It's been pretty tight-lipped.
Isn't that frustrating? They usually tell us when they do a Superman kind of thing, and now I'm addicted to it.
I know the Israelis are very good at their spycraft. I have to say, they keep a secret pretty well over there.
Well, if you hear, let me know. Come back a second time. Once again, though, for the audience, When We See You Again by Rachel Goldberg Pollan. It's available on Amazon for pre-order. It comes out in a week. I will play you the interview in a week. And Bethany, I look forward to talking with you about the book after you've had a chance to read it. The Congress is back. Majority Leader John Thune went to the Senate floor today to talk about the SAVE Act, cut number 13.
The junior Democrat from New York said this, and again I quote, "The ideas that we have in our wallets should be good enough to vote," end quote. Well, Mr. President, that is exactly what we offered. Licenses, state ID cards, tribal IDs were all acceptable forms of ID in our proposal. The same kinds of ID that we have in our wallets right now. Mr. President, multiple Democrat senators even acknowledge that their own states have voter ID requirements and that they work. The junior senator from Georgia came to the floor and said this, and I quote again, "I think you should have to prove that you are who you say you are before you vote. I support voter ID. We have voter ID laws in my state. You should have to prove that you are who you say you are before you vote." End quote. I couldn't have said it better myself. And the Democrat leader said, and I quote, "Our objection as Democrats is not to a photo ID," end quote. Except as Democrats' recent vote demonstrates, that's not actually true. Before the vote, the Democrat leader spoke on the floor and made it clear that when he says he supports voter ID, he means that he supports voter ID as long as the ID requirements in question are essentially meaningless. And he's not the only one. To quote a recent news story, the junior senator from Colorado said, and I quote, "He supports voter ID, but signaled he will vote no when informed that the bill does not allow voters to use a utility bill to prove identity," end quote. He voted no because you can't show a utility bill as a form of ID. Mr. President, you can't make this stuff up. The senator from Colorado used to own a brewery in Denver. And I have to wonder whether you could show a utility bill to buy a beer there.
I was wondering if that was coming. And it had to be coming. Poor Hickenlooper. He's just a jaw waiting for someone to hit it. Leader Thune then went to a gaggle with reporters to talk about DHS funding, cut number 14.
People at those agencies in that department are being paid. And thankfully for that, and then coupled with that, the intention that we now have to come in behind that and pass a reconciliation bill that would enable those agencies to continue to be funded 3 years into the future. So I'm trying to figure out exactly, as I think about it, what the Democrats got out of all this. Thanks to the work we did last summer in the Working Families Tax Cuts bill, the ICE and CBP agencies are funded. Both people, field staff, but also civilian staff, office staff are all being funded. And thanks to the good work that the President did, some of the other agencies within the department are currently being funded. All of the things that the Democrats made this about, which was supposed to be about reforms to the way that ICE and CBP operate, they got none of that. Zero. And now we're going to fund those agencies for 3 years into the future. The only thing the Democrats got out of this was they now own the issue of open borders and defund law enforcement. Honestly, I don't know what else they walk away from with this other than, again, trying to destroy the appropriations process, which historically has been done in a bipartisan way. But the Republicans are going to stand with our Border Patrol, with our law enforcement agencies, and we're going to ensure that they are funded not only today, but well into the future. And so the budget resolution Senator Graham is preparing, we will have on the floor hopefully as early as next week. We'll provide multiple years of funding for these agencies, and a reconciliation bill, which will follow shortly after, will ensure that that job gets done. So that's where we are in the process, but we're going to move quickly, decisively, and hopefully in a very focused way on ensuring that those important law enforcement agencies, contrary to the Democrats' defund law enforcement efforts, are funded not only today but well into the future.
Leader Thune also had comments on the blockade, cut number 15.
I think what you got to, again, look at what the president is doing. And I think right now he's trying to open up the Strait of Hormuz, which I think we are all supportive of, and the efforts that are being made there to further isolate the Iranian regime and their economy, which is an energy-dependent economy. Hopefully will have the desired effect, and we'll get the strait open again. And that's sort of their last resort. I mean, the military effort here has been extraordinarily successful. This is the sort of the last dying gasp of this regime, is to try and shut down the strait. And the administration is making an effort to ensure that it's open, that there can be traffic in and out of there. And hopefully that'll be successful, and we can begin to see this thing wind down.
It would sure be good news if Iran did the smart thing, which is declare, okay, no mas. We will allow inspections. Come get the dust. We're done. So pleased to welcome United States Senator John Cornyn from the great state of Texas. Senator Cornyn, good to see you. How are you?
Thank you, Hugh. Good. Thank you.
Senator, you've got an election coming up, and I want to let the audience know I will be inviting Attorney General Ken Paxton on the show. But if he says yes, I'm going to talk to him about his impeachment, about the fraud charges, about his divorce, about the Mont Blanc pen that he has allegedly stolen. We'll talk about it all, because I think he's going to lose that Senate seat if he beats you, but I don't think he's going to beat you. Now tell me why you think you're going to win.
Well, first of all, I don't think he'll accept your invitation. He's basically dodged every opportunity to answer hard questions, and I don't expect him to start now. But I do expect to win. I think, obviously, I'm strong on border security, endorsed by the National Border Patrol Council, which endorsed President Trump and has been there during the disastrous Biden open border policies, but now is steadfastly supporting border security. I've supported the president, as you know, 99.3% of the time. So the problem is Paxton has got so much baggage, and for people who are interested in learning more about it, there's a website called crookedken.com, which details all of the sorts of things that I'm sure you would ask him about if he were to accept your invitation. But I think Texas deserves good representation in the United States Senate, all 32 million of us. And I love my job, and it's important work, and have been privileged to do this for some time now. And hopefully they'll give me a chance to do it again.
I like to remind people it's pretty tough to find a former state Supreme Court justice who's also a senator. The only trouble is there aren't any scandals at all to talk about with you, Senator Cornyn. You've led this kind of square life, so we got nothing to ask you a hard question about. But I do want to ask you about the reconciliation. I just played Leader Thune saying you're going to do reconciliation for DHS. President dropped a budget of $1.5 trillion for defense. I guess the Pentagon wants a $200 billion supplemental. I'm told by the people in and around the shipbuilding budget that there are orders for every shipyard in America in that budget. I think Texas has got a dozen or 24 of them down there. How much defense spending is going to get into the reconciliation process?
Well, I'll support whatever the president asks for, because I think we have a lot of catching up to do. What's so amazing is we've seen the nature of warfare change in Ukraine and now in Iran and the Strait of Hormuz, and we just simply need to catch up. And our defense industrial base is way too bureaucratic and ossified, and this is dangerous for us. So I'll support the president's request, and if it's $1.5 trillion, I'll support that. But we need to shake off all this terrible bureaucracy. I think Secretary Hegseth and the Department of War are trying to do the right thing, but we still have way too many bureaucrats operating in the procurement process in the Pentagon, which slow things down, make them unaffordable, and are basically exposing us to great danger.
Senator Cornyn, you have the most valuable currency in the United States Senate, seniority. Do the voters of Texas realize that if they trade you out for a Tallarico, God forbid, or Attorney General Paxton, who'll be number 100 out of 100, that they lose all the advantages of that seniority? Is that an argument you can make to voters?
Well, you do learn a few things the longer you're here, and I've been. This is not a place where you can walk into on day one and make a difference. But for example, when the governor wanted Texas to be reimbursed $11 billion for what Texas taxpayers paid to secure the border during the Biden administration's open border policies, he called me. And I worked with all of the Texas delegation and the speaker and the majority leader, and we got that done. And we'll be presenting that check to the governor. The president will sometime in the near future. So I think it's easy to take that sort of effectiveness for granted. But look, Hugh, I think the contrast between Tallarico and me will be apparent to all. Tallarico is a phony. He's a wolf in sheep's clothing. The press kind of likes him a little bit because he's different, because he claims to be a seminarian. Maybe he is, but he's reading a different Bible than I am, claiming God is not binary, there's 6 genders, and that the Bible approves of abortion. So he's just a classic liberal or progressive in the image of Bernie Sanders and AOC, and we'll expose him as such.
He's a woke wolf, and I don't like wolves to begin with, but I don't like woke wolves, which brings me back to Ken Paxton. You won the primary, Senator, and I haven't seen polling since then, but are all your colleagues going down to Texas to stump for you? Because we really cannot afford to pour billions of dollars into Texas. You're a layup. You're like the Cavaliers against the Raptors. Are they working for you?
Well, Senator Thune and Senator Scott have been terrific, and I've appreciated their support. They recognize what Senator Thune calls the business case for my candidacy, because it'll be a whole lot cheaper, because Democrats won't pour in hundreds of millions of dollars into Texas to try to elect a Tallarico if I'm the nominee, because that will be a long shot, to be sure. So I'm very happy with the support I've gotten from our leadership, but more importantly, as you point out, I'm more happy with the support I got from Republican primary voters coming out first out of 3 on March the 3rd. And so now we need to finish the job. We're encouraging people to get out and vote in early voting from May the 18th through the 22nd, and then on Election Day, runoff day, May the 26th. And of course, the people who show up are the ones whose voice and whose vote count.
Last minute, Senator, May 18th to 22nd, early voting. Is that by absentee or is it in person?
In person. We'll still have, you can still vote by mail if you meet the qualifications, but we have the most generous voting opportunities in Texas of any state that I'm aware of. So you can show up in person for virtually the whole week before the election, or you can come in the day after Memorial Day on May the 26th. But it's really important to have a good turnout. You know, I really have come to believe that the reason we get such extremes in our November general elections is because there's such poor turnout and participation in the primaries. We had 11% of registered voters vote in the Republican primary, and maybe even less in the runoff.
Oh, we got to get people out, and we're on in so many stations in Texas. Hear me, get out and vote for John Cornyn, and when General Paxton shows up, I'll be sure to play it a few times. Willing to have him on, very willing to have him on. I know the equal time rules. He just hadn't wanted to come yet. Stay tuned, America. Thank you, Senator Cornyn. I did play some Senator Thune earlier. I do want to let you hear what he had to say about the reconciliation process. I was just discussing with Senator Cornyn, cut number 16.
We have spoken regularly, and the White House has been involved in all these conversations. So, I don't speak for the House or how they do things. We have our own unique challenges here in the Senate. But as we initiate this process, the budget resolution followed up with a reconciliation bill, and it will include are all elements that I think that, as we have talked with the Speaker and folks in the House of Representatives, they understand where we're going.
You worried they're going to ask for other things, though?
Well, they could. I mean, we have members who want other things. I mean, I want other things. But obviously, we have a specific mission and purpose here, and that is to ensure that these important agencies of our government that have vital functions when it comes to our homeland and national security are funded. That is a narrow and specific purpose, and my hope would be that if we can execute on getting that done here in the Senate, the House will be able to follow through.
I am hopeful too. Reconciliation requires perfect discipline in the House and the Senate. Budget committees have to get working. Then the committees of jurisdiction have to get working. Then the Appropriations Committee has to get working. But we did it once with the Working Families Tax Cut, which you will be experiencing tomorrow when you get your tax return or you file your tax. Got to put them in tomorrow, April 15th, the day that Democrats love and Republicans hate. April 15th is tomorrow. Let me remind you, I'm in the Relief Factor studio, and I take it every day. Took it on hour one. You watched if you were watching on the Salem News Channel. You heard if you were listening to the Salem Radio Network or on one of our wonderful affiliates. And by the way, I have a brand new affiliate to whom I must attest the great value of Relief Factor. It is WHKY in North Carolina. And WHKY in North Carolina, which is 1290 AM and 102.3 FM in Hickory, North Carolina, you will hear me talk about Relief Factor every day. You will hear me tell you every day that I take it every day and have for more than 13 and a half years. And that it's the only supplement I've been taking for more than 20 years. And most importantly, I routinely turn down asks from other supplement companies that will pay me a lot of money, but I don't want money. Whatever I advertise, I use. Whatever I tell you about, whatever I endorse, you haven't heard this before in Hickory, but it's true. If I tell you use andrewandtodd.com, it's because I did my mortgage with them. If I tell you, like I do, try Relief Factor, it's because I did and because I keep getting my miles in, though I did not do a mile this morning. I had to go downtown for the American Global Strategies Summit and talk with Ambassador O'Brien, former Prime Minister of Australia, Scott Morrissey, and a bunch of other people. Ed Morrissey runs Hot Air. I always confuse Ed Morrissey with the Prime Minister of Australia. It's an easy mistake to make. Anyone can make that mistake. But I really do believe in Relief Factor, and you got to give it a try. 1-800, the number 4 in the word relief. 1-800-4RELIEF. Joined by the editor-in-chief of National Review, longtime friend Rich Lowry. Rich, I have been listening with a bit of dismay to the editors over the last few weeks. Why do you think that dismay exists?
I'm sure, Hugh, you think some of us have been too negative, including perhaps yours truly.
Yes. I want Noah on every show. I want Noah to have 4 times as much time, and I want him to be on every show. So I thought we would just start by being fair to each other. What would you put down as the conditions under which you would proclaim Operation Epic Fury to be an unqualified success?
Unqualified would be the fall of the regime, assuming you don't get some sort of disaster where you have a Houthi-like insurgency threatening the Strait of Hormuz in a different way. But that would be the victory you'd ultimately be hoping for. I don't discount, Hugh, that could happen. I doubt it's happening on a schedule highly convenient to us. That's usually just not the way the world works, and this regime has survived a lot to this point. But 6 months from now, 12 months from now, I don't totally discount it. Short of that, I think if you get the highly rich uranium, that's a huge deal. Short of that, I think getting them just to reopen the strait and getting some sort of a deal to limit their nuclear program at the same time you've eliminated so much of the missile capacity and you kind of wrecked their economy, that would be a success as well.
Okay, for me, a minimum is that the strait has to reopen, and until the strait's reopened, we haven't won. And I gather 20 ships went through today. By reopen, I mean the average 100 to 120 ships a day that we were before the war. That's the minimum baseline, because we've wrecked their other thing. But a real win, they have to give us the highly enriched uranium, and they have to agree to a inspection regime significantly stronger than the one that the JCPOA had. To me, that's a That's an almost perfect win. The perfect win, regime change, I can't hope for. I don't think it's realistic. That's up to the people of Iran. They've just murdered 35,000 of them. I don't know that I'd be willing to go march in the streets or have my kids go do that. But what if we got the uranium, their economy's a wreck, and they've agreed to inspections? Isn't that like the best foreign policy win the United States has had in 30 years?
Yeah, so to be clear, what I signed up for at the outset of this war, I was skeptical of regime change or, again, doing it on our schedule from the air. But if we significantly degraded all of this and set back their nuclear program for years, that was a win for me. It's the Strait that's been the curveball. And I just think it's a core commitment of Anglo-American naval policy going back for centuries, free navigation of the seas. So what Trump was saying at times, and maybe he was just jawboning people and trying to get help from allies, but it's not our issue. Our crude oil doesn't come through there. The Europeans should take the lead. I thought that all was terrible. Now, I like much more what he's doing now. I think we need to see the Strait reopened again one way or the other.
Now, let's talk a little bit about NATO. I moderated a panel today with the former National Security Advisor O'Brien, his counterpart in Japan, and Prime Minister Morrison of Australia, former Prime Minister. And the PM reminded me, 9 years ago we had a crisis in the Strait, and Australia sent a frigate. I'm really down on NATO, Rich, and I've always been an Atlanticist, but I'm beginning to wonder, are they really worth it? And that took a lot to move me there. I've never, ever doubted that, but they're wobbly.
Yeah, I mean, they're always going to be wobbly, at least compared to us. So, look, the way I look at it, Hugh, in the grand historical sweeps of things, if you told someone you're going to basically control Europe is to defer to you on all military matters, Europe's going to be relatively united in doing this, you're going to effectively control Germany, which has been at the center of geopolitics on the continent for centuries, and they're all going to be happy about that. Any statesman throughout the last 500 years would say, yeah, give me that deal. I'll take that. So I don't think we should underestimate what we have in the form of NATO, but they're highly irritating. I think they've played this wrong. I think they should help. They have more direct at stake than we do in the reopening of the Strait. But on the other hand, we did irritate them unnecessarily. Irritate's the wrong word, too soft. We freaked them out unnecessarily by talking about taking Greenland by force, which never made any sense. There are reports that were preparing for war against us.
Oh yeah, the Danes sent a couple of platoons that, like, a symbolic deployment against their ally.
So you kind of, we've rubbed them the wrong way unnecessarily, and then they're like, well, you didn't tell us about this in advance, and now you're in the soup with the Strait, and you want us help. Come talk to us later. Now, I think that's the wrong attitude. I think they should be more willing to help for many reasons, and one of which is people like you are having the reaction you are.
Well, Maggie Thatcher is the one that told George H.W. Bush not to go wobbly when 1991 rolled around. And I got a real long memory about the Iranians. And I'm beginning to wonder, you're 57, I'm 70. I don't know how old MBD is, or your other participants know as a kid too, but I don't know if they have quite the emotional reaction about Iran. I hate those people. And let me play you Marco Rubio. Marco Rubio gave voice to my pent-up frustration with this regime last week. Let's play Marco.
These people are lunatics. They are insane. They are religious zealots who can never be allowed to possess a nuclear weapon because they have an apocalyptic vision of the future. And all of their neighbors know that, by the way, which is why all of their neighbors have been supportive of the efforts we're conducting.
This is what I want you to play for MBD, Rich. These people are nuts. We can't let them push us around.
Yeah, who has a similar attitude that we do from our generations? Donald Trump, right? No one who lived through 1979 and 1980 will ever view this regime as benign, right? As a benign actor or one that we can truly deal with. So I think a lot of the commentary is forced into this by Israel or gulled into it by Israel. No, he hates this regime to his core. We have statements going back decades by Donald Trump saying he's going to bomb them or he's going to seize Carg Island or whatever it is. So I think his heart is totally in the right place on this, and the strategic goal is the correct one.
So to put it in Rich Lowry terms, you always ask the exit questions. I think it's a very charming way to do it. Are we better off than we were 6 weeks ago, a year ago, and 5 years ago?
With regard to Iran,
Yes.
we'll be better off if the strait is reopened. I don't think it's a close call. Without the strait reopened, then it's a real mixed bag and it's inconclusive.
How about 5 years ago when Joe Biden was going into the White House and they were looking at another appeaser in a long line of Democratic appeasers?
I mean, Biden was a disaster on every level, so I'd rather have Trump, a hawk on Iran in office. But we can't lose the strait to them. That's going to be a historic blot on Trump's record, which is not the most important thing. It's going to be a blow to free navigation of the seas and ultimately to our security and wealth as a country. So that's the thing that just has to be fixed. And if I've sounded negative at times the last several weeks, that's the main reason. I think you discounted.
Well, I would agree with you. I agree with that. I just don't think it's possible. I can't imagine the United States. I know the president was mad and he posts stuff, but if people just ignored his posts and watched what he does, we're going to reopen the strait. We can't. One of our greatest allies, UAE, I don't know what they do. They have one pipeline, I guess, that goes out to the Red Sea, but we have to reopen the strait. It's like a strategic necessity.
Absolutely. Yeah, totally agree with you. And people focus on the oil, and we have, through hook and crook, made up some of that oil deficit, which is why we haven't seen, a catastrophe on the level that some people have predicted. Excuse me. But there are all sorts of other materials and goods that we get through the Strait of Hormuz that people aren't focusing as much on. So it has to reopen. And I think it'd be a national humiliation if we just let Iran control and toll the Strait of Hormuz. This is what we have a Fifth Fleet for, Hugh, to keep this kind of thing from happening.
All right, now I want to switch totally on you because you're the Protestant. We don't care what happens with the Pope. I'm the Catholic that says, I'd rather this not happen, but I don't really put much stock in it. MBD is the Catholic's Catholic. I really don't put much stock in this, Rich. The trading of statements and posts between a president who's got a political job and a pontiff who's got a religious job. Do you?
I think it's unfortunate. I don't put a huge amount of stock in it. Look, I think the Pope has been misleading in how he's portrayed what the Bible says about warfare. He cited on Palm Sunday this verse from Isaiah 1:15. You got blood in your hands and God's not going to listen to your prayers. That's about a condemnation of the religious practices in Judah. It's not about Judah waging warfare. And later in the chapter in the book of Isaiah, you have the king of Judah praying to God to smite the Assyrians who are threatening Jerusalem, and he does. So the idea that God never listens to the prayers of anyone who wages war, as Pope Leo says it, I think is simplistic and reductive. Now, just war matters, and I think the Pope should consider, when did Trump first talk about hitting Iran in this iteration? When they mowed down thousands of their own people in the streets.
That's the part that bothers me as a Catholic, is that Jimmy Lai is in jail in China because of the Roman Catholic Church making a bad deal with China. And I haven't seen much from the Vatican about the dead Iranian. Rich Lowry, I like to agree on that. I'll be listening to the editors whenever it comes out next. Thank you for joining me. Follow him on X at Rich Lowry. Listen to the editors. That's Oasis. They were inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame today. All my bump music coming from inductees today. I'm sure Matt Continetti is a big fan of Oasis, since he wasn't born when Oasis was out there. Matt, do you like Oasis?
Hugh, that's like the soundtrack to my adolescence, that song Wonderwall right there. Are you kidding? How young do you take me for, Hugh? I didn't just fall off the apple cart.
I think of you as a young man. That's a compliment, though. That's a compliment. I want to begin with a big question. Assess the past week, which would include Islamabad, an embargo, and a report from the Bank of Tehran that the economy is in collapse in Iran. And I mean collapse. Weimar Republic collapse.
Yeah. Well, I think it's been a roller coaster the past week. I think that after a potential distraction in Islamabad, the president has settled on what seems to me to be the appropriate policy of blockading the Iranian ports and answering Iran's hostage-taking of the Strait of Hormuz with American power. We have the power to control our own destiny, and that's what I think the president has done by saying that the U.S. Navy and Central Command will be disallowing ships to go in and out of Iranian ports, just strangling the regime's economy, which is really the lifeline to the IRGC, the terrorist regime. So I think we had the potential for a bad deal in Islamabad, but that didn't happen. And I think it didn't happen because the negotiating team, whether it was Jared Kushner or Steve Witkoff or Vice President Vance, saw just how intransigent the Iranians are. And it's also because President Trump has been crystal clear for decades. He won't allow Iran to get a nuclear weapon. He has not wavered, and he continues to stand strong as we enter this new phase of the conflict.
I agree with all that. I am getting very tired of people telling me what President Trump thinks and what J.D. Vance thinks and what Witkoff thinks. Have you noticed how many mind readers we have in the analytical community, Matt? They don't deal with events. They deal with what they think people think.
Yeah, it's a case of projection. You need a team of psychiatrists to study Washington, and they would view the analyst community as exhibiting that delusion of projecting their own fantasies and wish fulfillments onto these administration players. You know, it's interesting, Hugh. Both Kushner and Witkoff participated in the last round of negotiations prior to the beginning of Operation Epic Fury. And I think both of them went in thinking, you know what, there's a deal to be had with the Iranian regime. And they came away, if anything, more skeptical than before. And to hear Steve Witkoff talk about the way in which the Iranians treated him during that round of negotiations is to really listen to someone who, is one of my heroes once said, has been mugged by reality. And I think that's happened to Vice President Vance as well, because in his post-negotiation interview, he said, look, I may have given advice to the president before the beginning of the operation, but having dealt with the Iranians in Islamabad over the weekend, I can see it's very hard to make a deal with them. Why is it so hard to make a deal with them? Because the Iranian regime, what's left of it, understands that if they were to give up nuclear enrichment, the regime really has no reason to exist. And that is what the Iranians are playing for. They're playing for survival. We have a whole range of different goals in this operation, but what the Iranian regime is playing for is survival.
You know, we achieved a strategic breakthrough, I think, of sorts, and I hope we have kept Secretary Rubio's clip. Adam can whisper in my ear if we've got it ready to play. But in the meantime, I will ask you about Lebanon. As we speak, over at the State Department, a first ever is occurring. A delegation from the government of Lebanon is sitting down with a delegation from the government of Israel. What's that tell you, Matt Continetti? That's a fact. That's happening.
Well, it tells me that since the beginning of the post-October 7th conflicts, the Lebanese government has moved to a position where they understand that Hezbollah is a liability, not an asset. And there's a potential for some type of effort to disarm Hezbollah by the Lebanese government. Now, I think we have a ways to go before we reach that settlement. But it does show, I think, that like the other Arab states, like the other Gulf states in the region, since Operation Epic Fury, Lebanon and the Lebanese government has seen the face of the enemy. They understand that Iran and its so-called axis of resistance, these terrorist proxies, which include Hezbollah, Hamas, the Houthis, the militias in Iraq and Syria, they are contributing nothing to the Middle East except violence, terror, and bloodshed. And so I hope that these negotiations go well. We'll have to watch.
That's the very clarity that I think was the breakthrough. Here's Secretary Rubio last week.
These people are lunatics. They are insane. They are religious zealots who can never be allowed to possess a nuclear weapon because they have an apocalyptic vision of the future. And all of their neighbors know that, by the way, which is why all of their neighbors have been supportive of the efforts we're conducting.
Matt, that's why I think it was a big win. And when we can get the Secretary of State to say these people are lunatics and everybody knows it, isn't that a win for the world when we recognize Hitler is Hitler and the people running Iran are crazy?
I think the world is safer when the United States has leaders who can distinguish between good and evil, sane and crazy, who understand the threat from Iran, the threat of an Iranian nuclear weapon, all of the havoc, the economic dislocation, the damage to civilian infrastructure that Iran has caused during the weeks of Operation Epic Fury would be magnified to an apocalyptic dimension if they had a nuclear weapon. There would be no opening the Strait of Hormuz, which the United States government is now in the process of doing. if Iran had a nuclear weapon. So we've seen why Iran cannot be allowed to have this nuclear weapon. That doesn't mean the job is done. The strait has to be open, and we have to find a way, either diplomatically or militarily, to guarantee that Iran never produces enriched uranium again. But I think right now we're in a much better place than we were, say, a week ago.
Do you think we have to get the 600 pounds of your enriched uranium to call it a day, Matt? Or do we need the regime to do something concrete vis-a-vis the people of Iran who are held under their boot?
I mean, the uranium dust, as the president has called it and others have called it, is being monitored. It's underground. So whether we have eyes on it all the time and we just create a circle, a no-go zone for Iranians around that perimeter, or whether we actually extract it, I think we have several options. The Pickaxe Mountain facility, though, is one that I think we have to take very seriously. And someone has to gain entry into it. The United States allowing the IAEA to go in there and to monitor it. Those are very important. And opening the strait and not allowing Iran to impede the free flow of commerce on the seas. That is extremely important. Those two things, if we achieve both of those goals, combined with the way in which we've destroyed the Iranian war machine, truly degraded it, I think you then have the conditions combined with that economic pressure for the regime to unravel. It will be a process of months, but I think it will happen.
It took 3 years after Reykjavik for the Berlin Wall to fall. I think it might take less time for this regime to fall after Reykjavik 2.0 in Islamabad. Domestic politics next with Matt Continetti of the Wall Street Journal, the American Enterprise Institute. That's Iron Maiden. I don't think Matt Continetti listened to Iron Maiden. He doesn't strike me as an Iron Maiden kind of guy. Did you listen to Iron Maiden, Matt?
I went to school with a lot of kids wearing used Iron Maiden T-shirts, Hugh. That's about as close as I got.
I was going to say, this is definitely not your bowling lane. All right, I want to switch to domestic issues. Last week, little unnoticed because of the news, the president dropped the budget. That budget called for $1.5 trillion in defense spending and the most ambitious shipbuilding program since 1955, 18 warships, 16 auxiliary ships. What do you think about its chances? Do you think they're going to use reconciliation? And do you think it was partly in response to our being a naval power very much in the Straits and outside of the Straits right now in the here and now?
Right. Well, so much is up in the air with reconciliation. And of course, this weekend, Capitol Hill will be spent trying to get the shutdown of the DHS resolved. I don't know whether the $1.5 trillion defense budget will be through that process as well, though I think they should consider it because I believe they have two bites of the apple, the reconciliation apple left, Hugh. I think the key question here is what you pointed out with the capacity of our Navy. And I would just refer our audience to that great interview you did with Admiral Mark Montgomery the other day, where he was talking about kind of the burn rate of some of these vessels we have operating in the Middle East. And then, of course, in the Caribbean as well, where once the deployment ends, they have to go in for maintenance. And so you don't want to get into a situation where, God forbid, a crisis happens in the Taiwan Strait, and all of a sudden we have aircraft carriers, they're all in dry dock being repaired and can't move to respond to the crisis. So that is, I think, the biggest and most compelling argument for spending all it takes to expand our naval capacity. We have guaranteed the safe passage of the global commons of air, sea, and space since the end of the Second World War. That's what we're fighting for right now at the Strait of Hormuz. And in order to do that, you need a Navy capable of the job. And that's why I think Congress should move expeditiously to expanding our Navy, making sure it has the ships it needs to guarantee the security of commerce and the prosperity of the United States and the world in the event of a crisis.
So I want to close, Matt, by talking about President Trump's posts. And there have been a few that have been very controversial this week. I don't know why he posts them, but I do know the effect it has. Almost instantly, everyone in my life who has TDS sends me a direct message or a text that says, aren't you finally going to turn on him? Aren't you finally going to say he's crazy? Don't you feel bad? One guy told me I was in danger of losing my soul because he'd attacked the Pope and I wasn't attacking him back. Now, I just got done saying we shouldn't guess at what people's motives are. But do you think he does what he does online in order to remind people who've got TDS offline?
Sometimes I'm not sure why he does what he does, to be perfectly honest. I think the one thing we know about President Trump is he has no filter. And that's been actually an asset for him politically, because he is always very direct about how he feels at any given moment. Sometimes it gets him into trouble, and it's gotten him into trouble with more frequency, I think, in the past couple of weeks. But I, with President Trump, have a very simple rule. Rather than looking at what he says, I look at what he does.
What he does.
He's having this conflict with the Pope. I don't think it will benefit anyone, but I'm looking at what he does, and in the policy realm, the conflict we are engaged in at the moment with Iran, I believe he's settled on the right policy.
Now, I'm a Catholic, cradle Catholic, Matt. And popes have scuffed it up a little bit with presidents forever. We did a lot with this with Francis. We did some of this with Benedict and with John Paul, but not nearly as much. It doesn't matter. It doesn't change the church. It doesn't change the presidency. It sure makes good copy, though. Have you written about it yet? I wrote about it for tomorrow's Washington Examiner. Have you written about it yet? Because it's good copy.
It's good copy. I haven't read about it. I have to say, I do credit the president with originality for calling the Pope soft on crime. That was new to me. That was new to me. That made me laugh. I have to admit it. But it does make for good copy, and it puts liberals in weird situations. I saw one headline, Hugh, where USA Today was saying, "A Pope Leo for president." I said, really? You might want to look at some of his positions on these issues, right? That's the point. It's
no more abortion in the United States.
Politics. Yeah.
Matt Cotton, next time I will ask you about Axelrod's theory of Americans electing the opposite temperament, because I'm not sure what the opposite temperament of President Trump is. We'd have to find the most boring person in America to be president if that theory holds. Matt Continetti can be followed on X at Continetti, read in the Wall Street Journal at his Free Expressions column, and everything he does over at the American Enterprise Institute. Thank you, Matt. That is Phil Collins, and my guest is James Lileks, who could not be a more appropriate guest today on the day when the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame announces its annual inductees. So I'm going to give you a little bit of a minute on each of them. Let's start with Phil Collins, Lileks. What say you? In or out? Good choice, bad choice?
Fantastic choice. He's one of the best drummers in rock and roll. Imagine if at some point in the 60s, the Rolling Stones had said, you know what, we're going to put Charlie Watts, our steady drummer, into Mick Jagger's spot, and Mick Jagger went off to a solo career, and the Rolling Stones exploded. Imagine Richard Starkey taking over for Paul McCartney. It's about that. Phil Collins stepped into the role of the departed singer. The band blew up and became incredibly famous, and good for them. They deserve to make some money. And I was one of the first people to hear In the Air Tonight, because unlike most, I bought that album the second it came out because I was a Genesis fan. Phil Collins is also one of the world's greatest collectors of Alamo material. And as a matter of fact, a psychic told him that he was reincarnated from the last person to leave the Alamo before the battle. He donated the whole collection to the Alamo itself. So this magnificent thing that he assembled from all the millions that he got as a pop star ended up benefiting American history for generations to come. I love Phil Collins.
I would like to tell the audience, by the way, Lileks had no idea we were going to do this segment or talk about these people. So this is just Lileks being Lileks. You can hear him on Thursday night with Generalissimo on the after show, which is now called Dwayne's World, but you have to join the universe. Part number 2, Billy Idol. What say you?
Oh, God. I love Billy Idol. The sneer, the whiplash sneer, that buzz cut came out of a real, actual Generation X, as they call themselves, punk band. And he was a genuine punk, but he was too charismatic. And he got glammed up a little bit, buffed up, got some good songs, and an amazing guitarist, and deserved, again, the hit that he had. iconic 80s look and songs. What I love about Billy Idol is that the last thing I heard from him, there's a new documentary, by the way, called Billy Idol Should Be Dead. I haven't seen it. The last thing I saw from him was a Christmas album that Billy was singing, honey, baby, it's cold outside. And I was hoping that he did it with a particularly malevolent sneer in his voice of malice, the way people are always saying that song is meant to be. But no, he played it completely straight. Billy Idol doing, I can think of worse things, Dan.
We might not get through this list. Number 3, cue up Iron Maiden for people, Adam. Just a little Iron Maiden. Or maybe not. James, what do you think of Iron Maiden?
Well, one of the early hair bands, if you want to say, that spawned a whole lot of other guys who came out there, put a little bit more hair on, crimped their hair, put on a little bit more lipstick on there. What you got to remember about Iron Maiden was they were one of those groups that didn't just have a logo, they had a mascot. They had a mascot called Eddie the Head, I think he was called. It was sort of this cadaverous, leering EC Comics kind of guy that would accompany their antics. Great stuff. I wasn't really ever a heavy metal guy because it's too much about hello, Satan, let's sit down and have some crumpets. But again, you can't do the history of metal and rock in the 80s without getting the Iron Maiden in there.
All right. I'm not sure you're going to have any commentary on Joy Division and New Order.
Well, Joy Division, yeah. Joy Division, named after, I believe, a Hitler organization that handed out prostitutes. And then, of course, New Order out of that. New Order is one of the greatest synth bands, pop bands of the era as well. Distinctive, I think it's Bernard Summers is the guy who's the vocalist. This very dry bass sound you can always recognize. Their album Requiem, which I think came out in about 1991, 92, or I'm sorry, Republic, is one of the greatest synth pop records ever. And they're still turning it out periodically every other year. You'll say, oh, New Order has a song, and it'll sound like it did 20 years ago. The iconic Blue Monday, and I shouldn't use the word iconic so much, but Blue Monday is one of those songs that unites generations. Comes on the radio, I turn it up. It comes on the radio when my daughter's in the car, she turns it up. Great group.
All right, Oasis.
Yeah, I don't have much to say about them.
All right, Sade.
Sade. Sade was is this beautiful, gorgeous, sultry, smoky jazz singer. Came in about 87, 88, I'd say. Smooth Operator was her first big hit.
Is it really pronounced Sade?
I think it's Sade, yeah. Not Sade.
Oh, I thought it was Sade.
Yeah, I mean, beautiful, beautiful voice, romantic, sort of a happier person's Chris Isaac from the Distaff side. Everybody bought her album. Everybody made out to it. She deserves to be there. Is it rock? Well, if you want to expand the definition of rock to include sultry, smoky, soft, soulful songs, then sure.
Okay, Luther Vandross.
Yeah, probably. I don't know as much about him at all, except to say the name is recognizable, and I'd recognize a tune of his or two. But he's one of those guys who probably should have gotten in earlier, and now they're getting around to him because I believe, predates most of the people we're talking about.
Okay, very last one, and I have nothing to say about Wu-Tang Clan, but maybe you do.
I don't have anything to say about them either. And this just isn't because they're bad. Some of their stuff's okay. I like it. I'll nod around to it. But it's because it comes at a point where I, in my life, had stopped paying particular attention as much as I did before to radio and pop music. For two reasons. One, I was getting older. Two, I was finding more stuff that was niche than I believed. And I guess there's a third reason. The music of of my 30s was demonstrably inferior to the music of my 20s. It wasn't just that I got old and... Without question, it got bad. It got meretricious. It got stupid. There was still great stuff to be had, but you and I were lucky enough so that our drop off in interest in pop music coincided with the fall of pop music itself, and that's kind of a relief.
Now I got to ask you, Phil Collins should have been in like year 3, right? Why did it take so long?
I'm not sure about that. There's a lot of, I don't know how many they induct a year, but, I'd put ZZ Top before I put in Phil Collins. Phil Collins is a great drummer, but he's a jazz drummer in so many ways. He's a great vocalist, and that's true, but he didn't write a lot of the songs. I would have put, there's so many bands from the 60s, foundational bands that I would have put in first. I would have built that
Herman's
foundation
Hermits.
of the Rock Hall of Fame.
You'd have put in Herman's Hermits.
Yeah, second verse, same as the first. Not exactly the most lyrically inventive group out there, but yeah, I would have put them in, not because they're better, but just because I would have laid the foundation for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
Thank you. It's an evolutionary walk. You've got to start. Yeah. Do you go to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame ever?
No, I haven't been there. No.
Oh, James, that's a place you and Dwayne should do a. What are we going out with? Oh, Phil Collins. Lilacs, you can hear him again Thursday night in the after show, now called Dwayne's World. Used to be called Dwayne's World when it was outside the paywall. Now it's behind the paywall where the after show used to be. But Lilacs and the Magnificent Seven back with Dwayne on Thursday night. I'm going to be on special report tonight on the panel. I hope you tune in to watch that. Last night, Vice President Vance was on with Brett. The most important thing he said was this about our red lines, cut number 6.
We must have the enriched material out of Iran. We must have their conclusive commitment to not develop a nuclear weapon. And I think that if the Iranians are willing to meet us there, then this can be a very, very good deal for both countries. If they're not willing to meet us there, that's up to them. That's their decision. And really, the ball is very much in their court. So you ask what happens next. I think the Iranians are going to determine what happens next.
And I think what happens next is the Iranians cave. We may have to give them a little bit of diplomatic cover, but they're going to cave and we're going to get the nuclear material, or they're screwed. I did tell you all day long about the central bank report in Iran. They are so screwed. Now, don't you be screwed. Find the right person to do your mortgage at home. Markets are very volatile. You don't want to go with the wrong mortgage lender right now. It's spring. People are beginning to buy homes. It's off to a little bit slower start than normal, but people are still out there getting ready to buy a home. You want to do it with AndrewandTodd.com. 888-888-1172. 888-888-1172. Don't move home without them. Got it? Don't leave home without them. Don't move home without AndrewandTodd.com. They're with Union Home Mortgage. They are actually the lender. They will walk you through every step of the process. But you got to call them. 888-888-1172. 888-888-1172. Get pre-approved. Get the letter that proves it. Tell them you've got the mortgage already in line. That gives you an advantage. You go in the door when there's a line of people at the door that want to buy the house that you want to buy. AndrewandTodd.com. 888-888-1172. Let me also tell you about a toolkit, a 250toolkit.com from our friends at Americans for Prosperity, a great sponsor. The number 250toolkit.com. /Hugh at the end. A250toolkit.com/Hugh. That's all about celebrating our 250th birthday. And Americans for Prosperity have started the One Small Step initiative. I'm all into this. I'm very seriously into this because we need an active citizenry to survive. We need an active citizenry 250 years ago to get our liberty. We need an active citizenry every year to keep our liberty. For nearly 250 years, we have all taken one small step one way or another to move the ball forward. Let that be you at A250toolkit.com. Finally, I'm in the Relief Factor studio, and it's been a long day. I've been back and forth downtown a couple of times today, doing it again thanks to Relief Factor. No big mileage this morning. I was at the American Global Security gathering, but up and down and up and down and out and in and out and in and drive. That's okay. Because Relief Factor makes it very easy. If you're in your car right now and you're hurting because the commute is not what you wanted it to be, it's too long, the 395 or the 95 or wherever you are is completely backlogged, you should have gotten your Relief Factor already. Call 1-800, the number 4 and the word relief, 1-800-4-RELIEF. Ask for the starter pack, $19.95, less than $1 a day. Starter pack is also available at relieffactor.com, relieffactor.com, relieffactor.com.